The crowd roars like thunder, shaking the very foundations of the arena. Bright lights pierce through the darkness, illuminating the squared circle where two legends stand, their eyes locked in a silent war of wills. On one side, a man who redefined the meaning of fear in the boxing world, Mike Tyson, the youngest heavyweight champion in history, a force of nature with knockout power that sent shivers down the spines of his opponents. On the other, a giant draped in black, the symbol of WWE's most dominant and mysterious legacy, The Undertaker, a towering enigma who ruled the squared circle with an aura of the supernatural. It's a clash no one ever thought possible, two titans from completely different worlds, now standing inches apart, the air thick with anticipation. One is the baddest man on the planet, a destroyer forged in the brutal world of professional boxing. The other, a legend born from the shadows of sports entertainment, feared not just for his size and power, but for the myth that surrounded him. As the tension builds, the question lingers: what happens when unstoppable meets immovable? This wasn't just another match. It was a collision of two legacies, two entirely different disciplines converging in an epic showdown that had fans from both sides of the combat sports world holding their breath. Tyson, known for his explosive speed and devastating punches, had dominated the boxing ring in a way few had ever done before. His ability to end fights in the blink of an eye made him one of the most dangerous fighters to ever lace up gloves. But here, in this unfamiliar battleground, he wasn't facing an ordinary man. The Undertaker wasn't just another wrestler, he was a phenomenon, an icon who had stood toe-to-toe with giants, monsters, and warriors of every kind. He wasn't just known for his strength, he had something far more dangerous: an unshakable presence, an ability to intimidate even the fiercest of challengers. It was a clash between raw, unfiltered aggression and an unrelenting, almost mythical endurance. But the real question remained: would Tyson's fists be enough to bring down the dead man? The build-up to this moment was something out of a fever dream. It had started as whispers, a fantasy matchup debated among fight fans and wrestling enthusiasts alike. What if Tyson fought The Undertaker? It was the kind of question that seemed impossible to answer, a battle that defied logic. But as the talk grew louder, as speculation turned into something more tangible, the world realized that this wasn't just another fantasy. There was history between them, a connection that made this face-off all the more intriguing. Tyson had stepped into the WWE ring before, had thrown punches that dropped giants, had stood shoulder to shoulder with the toughest men in the business. But never like this. Never with the stakes this high. This wasn't a playful cameo or a publicity stunt, this was personal. The stage was set, and the atmosphere was electric. Fans lined up for miles, knowing they were about to witness something that would be talked about for generations. Every seat in the arena was filled, the energy was almost suffocating. The moment Tyson walked through that entrance, there was no mistaking the fire in his eyes. He wasn't here to play by anyone's rules. He had one goal: to prove that no matter the opponent, no matter the environment, he was still the most dangerous man alive. But as the lights dimmed and the haunting toll of the bell echoed through the arena, a cold chill swept over the crowd. The Undertaker's presence was unlike anything else in the world of combat sports. The slow, deliberate walk, the eerie silence between each step, it wasn't just an entrance, it was a psychological war. Tyson had faced some of the toughest fighters in the world, but never had he stood across from someone who seemed untouchable. The referee stood between them, eyes darting nervously as if even he wasn't sure how this would unfold. Tyson clenched his fists, his muscles twitching with anticipation. The Undertaker remained still, his eyes locked onto Tyson with an unnerving calmness. It was a contrast of energies, one fueled by pure, relentless aggression, the other shrouded in an eerie, almost inhuman composure. The seconds stretched on like hours, the air thick with something beyond tension. Tyson took a step forward, his instincts screaming for action. And then, just as the bell rang, something happened, something that no one in that arena, no one watching at home, could have ever predicted. What followed next would leave the world in shock. The moment the bell rang, time seemed to slow. Tyson's body coiled like a spring, ready to explode, his fists twitching with the kind of raw energy that had dismantled world-class boxers in seconds. But across from him, The Undertaker didn't flinch. He stood motionless, towering, his cold eyes locked onto Tyson with an almost supernatural calm. It was an eerie contrast, one man built for unfiltered destruction, the other wrapped in an aura of invincibility. The energy in the arena shifted, a wave of silence washing over the roaring crowd as they waited to see who would make the first move. Then, like a predator striking, Tyson lunged forward, his right hand flashing like lightning toward the Undertaker's jaw. The sound of the impact echoed through the air like a gunshot, but something was off. Tyson's fists had shattered men before, had left champions crumpled on the canvas, yet the Undertaker barely moved. He staggered back slightly, but his expression remained unchanged, his head snapping back into place almost instantly. Tyson's eyes narrowed. He had felt resistance before, but never like this. It was as if he had hit something immovable, something beyond muscle and bone. There was no fear in the Undertaker's face, no moment of shock, just the same cold, calculated stare. And then, in an instant, the dead man struck back. A hand shot out, gripping Tyson by the throat with terrifying precision. The force alone made Tyson's breath hitch, his body instinctively trying to break free. The Undertaker's grip was unrelenting, his fingers clamped down like iron, lifting Tyson slightly off his feet before shoving him backward with an unnatural strength. Tyson stumbled but caught himself, his heart hammering in his chest. He had fought monsters before, had battled men who outweighed him by dozens of pounds, but this was different. This wasn't just about strength, there was something in the Undertaker's presence, something unexplainable. The crowd erupted, half in disbelief, half in awe. This wasn't a normal fight. It felt like something out of a myth, a battle between two unstoppable forces, each refusing to bow to the other. Tyson, breathing hard, wiped his mouth with the back of his glove and smirked. If the Undertaker thought he could intimidate him, he was in for a fight like never before. Tyson knew what it meant to be feared, but he also knew how to break those who stood against him. He tightened his stance, his footwork shifting as he prepared to unleash the full extent of his speed. This time, he didn't hold back. Tyson came forward with a barrage, left hooks, right crosses, body shots that had broken men twice the Undertaker's size. Each punch landed with brutal efficiency, digging into ribs, hammering against muscle, looking to find that one weak spot. And yet, the Undertaker absorbed them, his massive frame barely yielding. The hits were powerful, anyone else would have been on their knees by now, but the dead man kept coming, almost as if pain didn't exist for him. The more Tyson swung, the more the tension grew. What kind of man could take this kind of punishment and still move forward? But then, a crack in the armor. One of Tyson's punches landed flush, a right hook that connected perfectly, sending the Undertaker staggering back. The crowd gasped. Tyson felt it, the slight shift in power, the moment where he could turn the tide. He surged forward, ready to capitalize, his instinct screaming for the knockout. But just as he moved in, the Undertaker did something no one expected. With a speed that shouldn't have been possible for a man his size, the dead man ducked low, his hand striking out like a viper. Before Tyson could react, he was lifted off his feet, his body flipping through the air in a way that defied logic. The ring shook as Tyson hit the mat, his breath leaving his body in an instant. It wasn't just the impact, it was the fact that, for the first time in years, he had been caught completely off guard. As he lay there, dazed for a split second, he saw the Undertaker looming over him, his cold expression unchanged. Something shifted in Tyson's mind. This wasn't just a fight anymore. This was something else, something that went beyond wins and losses. The crowd could feel it, the commentators were at a loss for words, and every person watching knew that whatever was happening in that ring was more than just a contest between two legends. It was a war of willpower, a test of endurance, a battle between two forces that refused to break. And as Tyson pushed himself back up, his fists tightening once more, he realized that this fight was only just beginning. The next move would change everything. Tyson's breaths came sharp and fast as he pushed himself up from the mat. The sting of the fall still lingered in his body, but his mind was already moving past it. He had been knocked down before plenty of times, but what mattered was always the next move. He wiped the sweat from his brow, eyes locked on the Undertaker, who stood motionless in the center of the ring. There was no gloating, no signs of exhaustion, just that same unreadable expression, as if he hadn't just thrown one of the greatest fighters in history to the ground. The weight of the moment settled in, the crowd growing louder, the air thick with something neither man could fully grasp yet. Tyson had faced fear before, but this wasn't fear, it was something else, something unfamiliar. He rolled his shoulders, trying to shake off the thought. Whatever was happening in that ring, he wasn't going to let it take control. He knew one thing: he had to bring the fight back into his hands. The Undertaker was strong, no doubt about it, but Tyson still had speed, still had the kind of knockout power that could end a fight in an instant. He needed to find the opening. So he moved, light on his feet, his body shifting in perfect rhythm, waiting for the right moment to strike. The Undertaker watched, his eyes following every step, unmoving, unreadable. Then, without warning, Tyson exploded forward, his right hand cutting through the air like a missile, aiming for the jaw. And then something happened, something no one in that arena expected. The moment Tyson's fist should have landed, the Undertaker moved not back, not sideways, but forward, stepping into the punch in a way that defied logic. Tyson's knuckles connected, but instead of the usual recoil, instead of the jarring impact that sent men stumbling, the Undertaker absorbed it, barely flinching. It was as if he had anticipated it, as if he had willed his body to take the hit without reaction. The crowd erupted in disbelief. Tyson himself felt it, his most dangerous weapon had landed clean, and yet the dead man still stood there, unfazed. Something wasn't right. For the first time in the fight, a sliver of doubt crept into Tyson's mind. Was he facing something he couldn't break? That thought alone sent a surge of adrenaline through him, fueling him to strike again. This time, it was a flurry, a combination so fast that most opponents wouldn't even see the punches coming. Left hook, right uppercut, body shot, another left. The Undertaker staggered, but he didn't go down. The impact was real. Tyson could feel the hits landing, feel the force behind them, but there was something unnatural about the way the dead man took the punishment. And then, the shift. Before Tyson could reset, the Undertaker's massive hand shot out, gripping his wrist with a force that felt like steel. Tyson tried to yank free, but the grip held firm. And then, in one swift motion, the Undertaker twisted his arm, sending a shock of pain through Tyson's shoulder before pulling him in close. Tyson barely had time to react before he felt himself being lifted again, his body hoisted into the air. The crowd gasped as the dead man spun, slamming Tyson down with a force that sent tremors through the ring. Tyson arched his back in pain, staring up at the bright arena lights. This was different. This wasn't just strength, there was something more at play here. He had fought men bigger, men stronger, but none had ever made him feel like this. The Undertaker stepped back, allowing Tyson space to rise, almost as if he was testing him. Tyson gritted his teeth and got back to his feet. He wasn't done. No matter what was happening, no matter how surreal this fight felt, there was no way he was going to let it end here. Then came the moment that changed everything. Just as Tyson steadied himself, a voice rang out from the entrance ramp. It was deep, commanding, and carried an authority that sent a ripple of confusion through the crowd. Every head turned, eyes searching for the source. And then, stepping out from the shadows, emerged someone no one expected to see. The energy in the arena shifted once again, the air thick with tension. Tyson turned his head slightly, just enough to see the figure approaching. The Undertaker didn't move, his gaze still locked onto Tyson. The moment the figure stepped into the arena, the entire energy of the fight shifted. Tyson, still catching his breath, squinted through the bright lights, trying to make out who had just interrupted the war unfolding before thousands of fans. The Undertaker didn't turn, didn't even acknowledge the presence behind him. He remained still, watching Tyson with that same emotionless intensity. The crowd, sensing that something major was about to unfold, fell into an eerie silence. Then, the figure took another step forward, and the tension in the air thickened. Tyson clenched his fists, adrenaline still surging through his body. He didn't care who it was, his focus was on the fight, on proving that no force, no mystique, could shake him. But then, the voice rang out again, clearer this time. A challenge, a warning, a statement that made the audience erupt in shock. The person standing at the entrance wasn't just any spectator, it was someone who had a history with both Tyson and The Undertaker, someone whose presence alone was enough to make this fight take an even wilder turn. The Undertaker slowly, almost methodically, turned his head. He still hadn't spoken a word the entire fight, yet his movement alone carried weight. Tyson didn't look away either. He could feel it, whatever was coming next, it was bigger than what either of them had expected. Then, without warning, the figure sprinted toward the ring, and the crowd roared back to life. Security barely had time to react before the ropes were shaking, and a third force had entered the battlefield. Tyson's instincts kicked in immediately. He had been in chaotic brawls before, had fought in the unpredictable, had faced the unexpected. But this? This was different. The Undertaker, still standing like an immovable monolith, slowly turned his full body toward the newcomer. Tyson, fists raised, took a step back, recalculating. He was still in the fight, but now the dynamic had changed completely. The new arrival wasted no time, charging directly at the Undertaker with the kind of reckless aggression Tyson had only seen in fighters desperate to make a point. The dead man barely reacted, absorbing the impact, but something was different now. For the first time, he staggered back. Tyson's eyes widened slightly. That was new. He had hit the Undertaker with everything he had, and the man barely flinched. But now, this newcomer had managed to shake him, even if just a little. Realizing the moment of opportunity, Tyson made his move. He wasn't about to let this turn into someone else's fight. His body moved before his mind could catch up, pure instinct, pure aggression. He lunged forward, fists flying, unloading another series of blows with the kind of precision that had made him the most feared boxer on the planet. This time, they landed clean, and with the added chaos in the ring, the Undertaker finally showed signs of struggle. The three men clashed in the center of the ring, a collision of power, endurance, and sheer will. The crowd couldn't believe what they were witnessing. What had started as an impossible matchup had turned into something no one could have predicted. Blow after blow, strike after strike, the fight became something beyond just a contest. It was a battle of survival, a test of who could outlast the storm. Then, in the heat of the brawl, it happened. The final moment that no one saw coming. Tyson, locked in his rhythm, dodged a heavy swing from the Undertaker and countered with a brutal uppercut. At the same time, the newcomer lunged forward, targeting the deadman's midsection. The combined force was overwhelming, and for the first time, the Undertaker dropped to one knee. The crowd exploded. Tyson, breathing hard, took a step back, realizing what had just happened. He had done what no one else had managed to do. He had brought the dead man down. But before he could react further, the Undertaker's head slowly lifted. His eyes, now burning with something primal, locked onto Tyson's. The moment lasted only a second, but it was enough. With an almost inhuman surge of strength, the dead man rose, grabbed the newcomer with one hand, and sent him crashing out of the ring with a force that rattled the barricades. Tyson barely had time to react before he felt the cold grip around his throat. The arena held its breath. The crowd was deafening. In one swift motion, the Undertaker lifted Tyson high into the air. The moment stretched, frozen in time, before the final impact shook the ring. The lights flickered. The sound was thunderous. Tyson lay on the canvas, chest rising and falling rapidly, mind reeling from the impact. The Undertaker stood over him, silent as ever, before slowly stepping back into the shadows. The bell never rang. No winner was announced. There were no rules left to enforce. This wasn't about victory, it never had been. It was about something else, something bigger than any belt or title. As Tyson pushed himself up onto his elbows, his breath coming in sharp gasps, he knew one thing for sure. He had faced legends, had conquered giants, but what had happened here tonight was unlike anything he had ever known. And as the dead man disappeared into the darkness, Tyson couldn't shake the feeling that this wasn't the end. It was only the beginning of something even greater.